The chandelier light burned hot above me, throwing golden shadows across the room where my parents sat, smug and waiting. "Bring the plates. Hurry up," my mother hissed. I wasn't their daughter in that moment. I was their maid. The scrape of silverware and the laughter of relatives cut into me like glass. My father's smirk widened as he lifted his glass, pretending to toast. To family and to knowing your place. Laughter rippled across the table, but my hands trembled as I carried another tray. The porcelain felt heavier than stone. I swallowed the burn in my throat, staring at the polished wood floor so they wouldn't see my eyes. In that suffocating silence, they thought they had me trapped, that I would always serve, always bow, always stay small. But deep inside, a different fire was already burning. The voice of the narrator cuts in, steady and sharp. They thought this humiliation would break me. They had no idea that one day a CEO worth millions would stand in awe of me, praising a $4 million contract I closed on my own. Cliffhanger. That night was the last time I let them win. Morning in our house always began the same way, with me cleaning up after everyone else. The smell of burnt toast, the sticky juice glasses left on the counter, the trail of my father's muddy shoes across the tiled floor, it all fell on me. Not because I wanted it, but because it was expected. "Don't forget to sweep the porch after you wash the dishes," my mother said one morning without looking up from her phone. Her voice was clipped, businesslike, as if she were addressing hired help. "Yes, Mom," I answered quietly. My parents weren't cruel in the way you see in movies. No shouting, no flying plates. Their cruelty was quieter, more calculated. They made me useful, but never valuable. I was the invisible hand that kept the household moving, while my siblings basked in affection, encouragement, and freedom. I noticed the differences early on. My brother, Daniel, was praised for every small achievement. He could fail a class and still be called brilliant. My sister Claire received expensive gifts, designer bags, new phones, just for existing. When it came to me, at best, I was handed grocery lists and reminded of everything I hadn't done perfectly. Still, I tried to hold on to peace. I studied late into the night, hiding my textbooks under my pillow so the lamplight wouldn't give me away. I worked side jobs tutoring neighbors' kids, saving every crumpled bill in a small metal tin I kept locked under my bed. That tin became my secret symbol of hope. My piggy bank, not just for money, but for escape. But my parents noticed my diligence in the worst ways. If I earned money, they found ways to take it. "You live here for free," my father would say, demanding I contribute. If I won awards at school, they claimed I was just lucky. The most cutting moment came one Sunday afternoon. Guests filled the living room, sipping coffee and nibbling pastries my mother hadn't lifted a finger to make. I had spent hours preparing everything, brewing, baking, setting the table. My hands were still red from the heat of the oven when my father clapped Daniel on the back. "Everything here," he boasted to the guests, "is thanks to Daniel. He really knows how to host." My brother grinned, saying nothing. Everyone applauded him while I stood in the doorway, holding an empty tray, invisible. The sting of that moment cut deeper than any insult, because it wasn't just about chores or favoritism, it was about identity. They wanted me small, voiceless, erased. But here's what they didn't know. Every moment I spent in silence, I was also learning, observing, planning. The skills they dismissed, my ability to organize, to problem solve, to persevere under pressure, were quietly sharpening into something powerful. Even then, though, the toll was heavy. Nights lying awake, replaying every word they'd said. My body ached constantly, knots in my shoulders, headaches that wouldn't leave. Sometimes I thought about running away. But with what? a handful of savings, and a tin that felt laughably small against the weight of their control. Still, something inside me refused to break. One evening, after another day of unending chores, I pulled the tin from under my bed and opened it. Crumpled bills, coins, a few checks from tutoring, maybe a few $100s. I let the metal clink echo in the quiet room. It didn't sound like much, but to me, it sounded like freedom. I pressed my hand against the tin, whispering to myself, "One day, this will mean something. One day they'll see." But of course, they weren't about to let me go that easily. Because just when I thought I had learned to endure their quiet humiliations, they found new ways to tighten the leash, to remind me of my place, and the sting that would change everything. It came wrapped in lace and glass. It was the day of my sister's birthday, when my parents humiliated me in front of a room full of people, not with words this time, but with a gesture so small, so cutting, that it still makes my chest tighten whenever I remember it. That was the moment I realized their cruelty wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. And it was only going to get worse. Claire's birthday party was a spectacle. Crystal vases filled with lilies, a 3-tiered cake glittering with fondant pearls, guests streaming through the front door in heels and pressed suits. I'd been up since dawn polishing silverware, steaming tablecloths, arranging flowers that stained my fingers green. By the time the guests arrived, my hair clung damp to my forehead, my apron streaked with flour. But no one noticed. That was the point. "Stand over there," my mother whispered, motioning me toward the corner as Claire floated into the room in a sparkling dress. "Don't get in the pictures." So I stood there, holding an empty tray, watching flash after flash of cameras capture the perfect daughter while I blended into the wallpaper. The sting came later, when it was time for gifts. My parents handed Claire a velvet box. Inside lay a necklace, delicate gold, a single teardrop diamond catching the light. Gasps of admiration filled the room. And then my father chuckled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't worry," he said, glancing at me. "We didn't forget you. We got you something too." He reached under the table and tossed me a dish towel. Folded, but stained from the kitchen. Laughter rippled across the guests. Some looked away, embarrassed. Claire smirked, clutching her necklace. I wanted to disappear. My throat tightened, my face burning hot. That dish towel weighed heavier than any diamond necklace. It was a petty act, but it told me everything. To them, I wasn't family. I was staff. From that night on, their behavior escalated. My father began reminding me, even in front of strangers, that I owed them for everything. "She lives under our roof, she eats our food," he'd say, as if I were a burden instead of a daughter. My mother found new ways to chip at me. If I bought new shoes with the money I earned tutoring, she'd scoff. "Where do you think you're going in those?" "You're not Claire." The house itself felt like a cage. Every corner reminded me of my place. My father's study with the locked cabinet I wasn't allowed to touch. The dining table where I served but never sat. The staircase I scrubbed while my siblings strolled past, scrolling on their phones, not lifting a finger. The toll crept into my body. My chest felt tight at night, breaths shallow. My hands shook when I carried trays, terrified of dropping something and proving their words right. I stopped sleeping, lying awake in the dark, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional creak of the house settling. Sometimes I wondered if I was the one who was broken, if maybe I deserved this treatment. That's what they wanted me to believe. But then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I was tutoring a neighbor's son at the library. His mother, a woman named Evelyn, came to pick him up. She lingered after he ran off to the car, her eyes soft, studying me. "You're remarkable with him," she said quietly. "You have a gift." I shrugged, embarrassed. No one had ever called me gifted before. But she didn't stop. I don't know what's happening at home, but you carry yourself like someone who doesn't know her own worth yet. Don't let them convince you you're less than you are. Her words sank into me like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. For the first time in years, I felt seen. When I walked home that evening, the weight of my parents' house pressed on me as usual, but Evelyn's words echoed louder. You don't know your own worth yet. I held on to that sentence like a rope in a storm, because maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone. And that realization terrified my parents more than anything, because the more they tightened their grip, the more I started to believe, deep down, that one day I would get out. That was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. Evelyn's words stayed with me, but my parents seemed determined to erase them. Almost as if they sensed something shifting inside me, they doubled down. It started with money. One morning, my father stood at my bedroom door holding my metal tin, the one I thought I'd hidden so well. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, shaking the coins and crumpled bills so they rattled like chains. "I earned it," I said, my voice trembling. "Tutoring." His mouth curled into a sneer. "Under my roof, everything you earn is mine." Don't forget that he left the tin on my bed, emptied. My chest hollowed, the silence of the room pressing in like suffocation. Then came the family meetings. My parents would gather Daniel and Claire in the living room, positioning me in front of them as if I were on trial. "Why can't you be more like them?" My mother scolded, her manicured fingers stabbing the air. "Daniel is ambitious. Claire is graceful. You're just ordinary." Each word chipped at me. My siblings said nothing, their silence heavier than insults. But the breaking point came weeks later. I returned from the library one evening to find my father waiting, arms crossed. "You've been spending too much time outside this house. People are starting to talk." I blinked. "Talk about what?" "That you think you're better than us," he said. "That you're plotting something." My heart raced. "That's not true." He cut me off. "You live here because we allow it. Don't forget you don't own anything. Not the bed you sleep on, not the roof over your head." That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, every word pounding in my skull. They wanted me cornered, small, powerless. And for a moment, I almost believed I was. But the next morning, something inside me snapped. As I dressed for another tutoring session, I remembered Evelyn's voice. "You don't know your own worth yet." I walked to the library with a new determination. That day, Evelyn noticed the change. She pulled me aside after her son's lesson. "You're strong," she said simply, "but strength without strategy is wasted. Do you have a plan?" I shook my head, ashamed. She smiled gently. "Then it's time you made one." That conversation planted a seed. I started documenting everything, every cruel remark, every unfair demand, every time they took what was mine. I wrote it all in a notebook I hid inside a hollowed-out textbook. At first, it was just a way to keep myself sane. But slowly, the pages became more than that. They became proof. And when my father noticed I wasn't flinching the way I used to, he grew angrier. One evening, after another staged family meeting, he slammed his hand on the table. "You think you can defy me? You're nothing without us." "Nothing," I looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time without fear. "We'll see." For a split second, his expression faltered. Just a flicker, but I saw it. They thought they still had control. They didn't. Because what they couldn't take from me was what I was building quietly, in secret. The tutoring had expanded into something bigger. Recommendations spread, and suddenly, I wasn't just helping kids with homework. I was consulting for small businesses, organizing schedules, even drafting proposals. My parents thought I was wasting time at the library. In reality, I was laying the foundation of something they couldn't touch. Every coin, every bill I saved now went into a bank account they didn't know existed. For the first time, I wasn't just enduring. I was fighting back. Silently, strategically, patiently, and soon the leverage they had over me would vanish. Because I wasn't just earning money anymore. I was building power, and they had no idea that the moment they tried to crush me completely would be the same moment I revealed just how much strength I had been hiding all along. It began with whispers. At church, neighbors suddenly looked at me differently, their smiles strained. In the market, 2 women I'd known for years lowered their voices when I walked past. I didn't understand at first, until Evelyn pulled me aside one afternoon. "Your mother's been talking," she said carefully. "She told people you're unstable, that you've been stealing from her." My stomach dropped. "What? That's not true." "I know," Evelyn said firmly, "but not everyone will." "She wants to isolate you." It was a strategy as old as control itself. Poison the well before I could take a sip. Soon, the smear campaign grew bolder. My father told extended relatives I was ungrateful and wasting their resources. He painted my siblings as hard-working, noble children, and me as a parasite. At family gatherings, cousins avoided my eyes. At the grocery store, clerks who once joked with me now looked suspicious when I paid with cash. It worked, at least on the surface. I felt the weight of eyes on me everywhere I went, as if I carried a scarlet letter branded into my chest. But what my parents didn't realize was that I had already shifted from defense to offense. Every insult they hurled, I documented it. Every time they spread lies, I recorded the aftermath in my hidden notebook. Their smear campaign wasn't destroying me, it was building my evidence. And my tutoring side hustle, it had quietly evolved into something more. A local shop owner had hired me to organize his accounts. Then another asked me to write proposals. Soon, I was consulting for 6 small businesses, helping them with structure, schedules, budgets. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving their world, I was creating my own. Still, the toll on my body grew. Sleepless nights left me dizzy, shadows forming under my eyes. My heart hammered with anxiety whenever the phone rang, terrified it would be another relative parroting my parents' lies. But Evelyn remained my anchor. "Don't just react," she told me one night over tea. "Prepare. They're trying to break you in public. You need to decide how you'll break them in truth." Her words struck like lightning. Break them in truth. I began gathering more than just notes. Receipts of money I had earned but been forced to hand over. Screenshots of my father's text messages where he admitted taking from me. Witness accounts from neighbors who had seen me doing all the chores while my siblings lounged. Piece by piece, I was building a case. Not just for survival, but for justice. The symbolic tin, once emptied by my father, now had a replacement, a proper bank account in my name alone. I'd deposit small amounts, careful not to draw attention. Watching the numbers grow felt like watching my own strength take shape, digit by digit. My parents noticed the shift in me. My silence wasn't submission anymore. It was strategy. And it drove them wild. They escalated, dragging Daniel and Claire into the fight. My siblings parroted their lines, rolling their eyes when I walked in the room, calling me Maid under their breath. At dinner, Claire smirked. "Don't forget the plates, housekeeper." My father chuckled, enjoying the cruelty. But I no longer reacted, not outwardly. Inside, I burned hotter than ever, because I knew something they didn't. The day of reckoning was coming. I could feel it in the quiet way Evelyn looked at me when I shared my growing list of evidence. I could see it in the steady rise of my bank balance. Enough now that if I needed to, I could leave. And when that day came, I wouldn't just walk out empty-handed. I would walk out carrying the truth like a weapon. The day of reckoning was coming and no one could stop it. The showdown didn't happen in the privacy of our home. It happened in front of everyone. It was a family dinner, meant to celebrate Claire's engagement. The restaurant glittered with chandeliers and polished glassware, waiters in crisp white shirts weaving between tables. My parents had insisted on hosting it, making sure every extended relative, every family friend, every neighbor of importance was invited. I wasn't supposed to sit at the table. My mother tried to push me toward the side, like always. But this time, I calmly pulled out a chair and sat beside Claire, whose diamond ring flashed under the lights. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes narrowed. But they said nothing. Not yet. Halfway through the evening, after the champagne toasts, my father rose to speak. He tapped his glass, his voice ringing out. "Family is about loyalty," he said, smiling in my direction. "And some of us have shown it more than others." Laughter rippled through the room. I felt dozens of eyes turned toward me, expecting me to shrink, to bow my head in silence. But I didn't. I stood slowly, my hands steady, my voice calm. "You're right," I said. "Family is about loyalty, but it's also about truth." The room hushed. I pulled a folder from my bag, the one I had carried with me for weeks, waiting for this moment. Inside were copies of receipts, screenshots, bank statements, evidence of years of stolen money, manipulations, lies. I laid them out on the table one by one, the papers whispering like knives against the linen. "This," I said, pointing to one receipt, "is the money I earned tutoring that you took from me. Here are the text messages where you admitted it. And here," I slid another page forward, "are the records of me working for businesses while you told everyone I was lazy." Gasps filled the room. My cousins leaned forward, whispering. Claire's fiancé's family shifted uncomfortably. My father's face paled. He opened his mouth, but no words came. I turned to my mother. "And this," I said, holding up my notebook, thick with years of entries, "is every insult, every humiliation, every lie. Written down, dated, backed up. You told people I was unstable? These pages tell the real story." Her hand trembled against her glass. The silence was suffocating. Even the waiters froze, holding trays mid-air. And then I said the words that had been burning in me for years. "I don't want apologies. I want change." My voice echoed against the walls, calm but unyielding. For the first time they looked small. My father's hand shook as he set down his glass. My mother's face cracked, the mask of superiority slipping, as her lips quivered. Claire looked away, shame flickering in her eyes. Daniel fiddled with his napkin, pretending not to exist. But the damage was done. Their empire of lies had crumbled under the weight of truth. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I stood tall, my evidence shining brighter than Claire's diamond. And in that moment, I wasn't the maid. I wasn't the burden. I was the one who owned the narrative. The room stayed frozen in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Evelyn, seated at the far end of the table, spoke softly but firmly. "She's right." One by one, murmurs rose. Relatives who had once turned against me now nodded, shifting uncomfortably under the truth laid bare. The whispers weren't about my instability anymore. They were about my parents' cruelty. My father tried to stand, but his knees buckled. My mother dabbed her face with a napkin, hands trembling. For once, they weren't in control. And I knew, deep in my bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath wasn't explosive, it was quiet. But quiet can be devastating. After the dinner, word spread faster than fire. The whispers my parents had planted about me being unstable dissolved under the weight of proof. Relatives who once avoided me now avoided them. Neighbors who once nodded respectfully now glanced away when my father walked by. The shift was subtle but irreversible. Their authority had cracked. At home, the atmosphere was heavy. My father no longer barked orders. My mother no longer paraded me in front of guests. Claire stopped mocking me, her fiancé whispering to her to leave it alone. Even Daniel, smug as ever, kept his distance. But it wasn't their silence that mattered. It was mine. For the first time, my silence wasn't forced. It was chosen. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to explain. The truth had already spoken for me. In the weeks that followed, I moved with a freedom I'd never felt before. The bank account I'd built in secret was strong enough to support me. The consulting jobs I had taken on the side blossomed into full-time contracts. I signed my first major deal, $4 million, negotiated not in a kitchen corner or a library desk, but in a glass office overlooking the city skyline. When the CEO shook my hand, his eyes shining with respect, I remembered that night under the chandelier when my father smirked and toasted to knowing your place. This was my place, and it had nothing to do with them. The symbolic objects of my past transformed too. The metal tin, once emptied by my father, now sat on my desk, but not with crumpled bills. Inside, I kept a copy of the signed $4 million contract, folded neatly, a reminder of what I had built when no one believed in me. The notebook where I had written down every insult, I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away. I placed it on a shelf in my new apartment, its spine worn, its pages filled. Not as a wound, but as a record of survival, a story I had lived through and conquered. And the dish towel, yes, the one they once gave me as a gift. I framed it, hung it on my wall, right next to the contract. A reminder that what they used to belittle me became the proof of my rise. When my parents tried to reach out, their voices sounded smaller. My father called once, muttering about misunderstandings. My mother sent a text with half-hearted words like family and unity. I didn't reply with anger. I didn't need to. Instead, I sent a single message. Respect isn't owed. It's earned. I've earned mine. And I won't give it back. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was release. The weight that had bent my shoulders for years had lifted. For the first time, I stood tall not out of defiance, but out of peace. Life moved forward. Evelyn became not just a mentor, but a friend. My network expanded. My work grew. My name, once whispered with pity, was now spoken with respect. And sometimes late at night, I would sit by the window of my apartment, city lights glowing below, and think about the girl I used to be. The one scrubbing floors, carrying trays, shrinking under smirks. She wasn't gone. She was still part of me, but she wasn't trapped anymore. I smiled, whispering into the quiet. They thought that night would break me. But it was only the beginning, the final image. Where once I stood trembling in a corner, holding an empty tray under a chandelier. Now I stood in my own office, sunlight pouring in through floor-to-ceiling windows, a framed dish towel on the wall, and a $4 million contract in my hands. The contrast was cinematic. The humiliation had become empowerment. The silence had become strength. And the story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. So that's my story. My parents thought they could define my worth by keeping me small, by calling me their maid, by taking everything I built. But worth isn't something anyone can hand to you or steal from you. It's something you claim for yourself. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you faced favoritism, betrayal, or the crushing weight of someone else's control. Maybe you've been told you'll never rise, that you'll never matter. But here's the truth. You do matter. And the moment you decide to step out of their shadow, to build your own path, that's the moment everything changes. I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated or forced to prove your worth? Share your story in the comments below.